Think about your closest friends, not the people you work with, not someone who occasionally likes your posts. Real friends, the kind of person you could call at 2 o'clock in the morning without wondering if you're bothering them. Now ask yourself something surprisingly difficult. When was the last time you made a new one? Not someone you met, not someone whose name you remember. A real friend. For many adults, the answer isn't last month. It isn't last year. Sometimes, it's been 5, 10, or even 20 years. And what's strange is that most people never notice when it happens. There isn't a dramatic goodbye. No single moment where friendship suddenly disappears. Life simply becomes busier. Work demands more. Family needs more. Bills arrive. Schedules fill up. Weeks become months. Months quietly become years. And without realizing it, the easiest thing in the world somehow became one of the hardest. Before we go any further, if you're fascinated by psychology, neuroscience, and the hidden science behind everyday life, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel and join us every week as we explore the mysteries of the human mind and the invisible forces shaping our lives. Now, let's discover why making friends becomes so difficult as we grow older. People often believe this happens because adults become colder, or because modern society is broken, or because everyone is simply too busy. But none of those explanations tell the whole story. The real answer begins much deeper, inside your brain, and inside a survival system that evolved hundreds of thousands of years before cities, before schools, before careers, or even before the idea of adulthood existed. Because your brain wasn't designed for networking events. It wasn't designed for social media. It wasn't even designed for meeting strangers. It was designed for something much simpler. A small group of familiar faces. The same people, seen every single day. The same campfire. The same tribe. The same community. For almost all of human history, friendship wasn't something you searched for. It happened naturally, without effort, without planning, without calendars, without texting first, without wondering whether someone actually wanted to spend time with you. And understanding why that changed may completely transform the way you think about friendship forever. Because the greatest obstacle to making friends as an adult isn't other people. It's the invisible world your brain still believes you live in. And to understand that, we have to travel back, long before adulthood ever existed. Millions of years ago, your ancestors lived in a world where being surrounded by people wasn't optional. It was the difference between life and death. And surprisingly, your brain still hasn't forgotten that world. Imagine waking up 40,000 years ago. There are no apartment buildings, no highways, no offices, no schools, no cities stretching beyond the horizon. Just forests, grasslands, mountains, and a small group of familiar faces. These are the people you've known your entire life. You hunt together. You eat together. You sleep near the same fire every night. You don't wonder who your friends are. You don't have to. Friendship isn't something you build. It's simply the environment you live in. For almost all of human history, humans didn't choose their social circle. They inherited it. The children who grew up beside you stayed beside you. The adults who protected you became the elders who guided you. Every day, you saw the same people, again, and again, and again. Without realizing it, your brain was collecting something far more valuable than conversation. It was collecting predictability, because every familiar face answered an important survival question. Am I safe? Thousands of years later, your brain still asks that exact same question. It just asks it in different places. At work, at the gym, at a neighborhood cafe, at a party where you barely know anyone. Long before language became as sophisticated as it is today, your ancestors survived by recognizing patterns. Who shared food, who stayed loyal, who disappeared during difficult times, who could be trusted. Friendship wasn't just emotional, it was practical. A trusted friend could help you hunt, warn you about danger, care for your children, share food during difficult seasons. In a world where survival depended on cooperation, being accepted by the group wasn't simply comforting. It was essential. This is why social rejection feels surprisingly painful. Your brain never learned to treat exclusion as a minor inconvenience. To your nervous system, being left out once carried enormous consequences. Modern life may be safe, But your biology still remembers a much older world. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying human social behavior. His research suggested that our brains naturally manage meaningful relationships within surprisingly limited social circles. Not hundreds, not thousands, a relatively small number of people. Enough to build trust, enough to recognize every face, enough to know who would stand beside you when life became difficult. For thousands of generations, your brain practiced exactly that. Small groups, repeated interactions, shared experiences, over and over and over again. But then, everything changed. Cities grew, people moved, jobs replaced villages, families spread across countries, neighbors became strangers, and something else quietly disappeared. The one ingredient your brain depended on to create friendship: repeated exposure. As children, we don't become friends because we're exceptionally skilled at socializing. We become friends because we keep seeing the same people. Every morning, every recess, every class, every afternoon. Again, and again, and again. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect. The more often we encounter someone in a positive environment, the more familiar they become. And familiarity often becomes trust. Trust slowly becomes comfort. Comfort becomes friendship. Children don't schedule friendships. They accidentally grow them. Adults rarely experience that same process. You drive into a garage, take the elevator, sit in your office, return home, close the door, and repeat. The environments that once created friendships automatically, quietly disappeared, without anyone noticing. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If your brain still needs repeated connection, what happens when modern life no longer provides it? The answer explains why making friends as an adult often feels less like something natural and more like trying to grow a forest without planting the seeds. Most adults believe they don't have enough time to make friends. But time isn't actually the biggest obstacle. Something much deeper changed first, and it happens inside your brain. Think back to your first day of school. You didn't know anyone. Every face was unfamiliar. Every conversation started with a simple question. What's your name? Nobody thought it was strange. Nobody worried about being rejected. Making friends wasn't a goal. It was simply what happened when dozens of children spent every day together. Year after year, friendship grew almost automatically. Now imagine your first day at a new job. The room feels completely different. Everyone already seems busy. Everyone appears to know where they belong. Conversations are polite, professional, carefully measured. You learn names. You exchange emails. You attend meetings. But months later, many of those people still feel like strangers. What changed? The answer isn't confidence. It isn't personality. And it certainly isn't age. It's structure. As children, life constantly placed us inside environments designed for connection. Schools, playgrounds, sports teams, neighborhood streets, birthday parties, summer vacations. The same people, the same places, every single week. Adults live in a completely different system. Our schedules become fragmented. One friend works nights, another travels every week. Someone else moves to another city. A close friend gets married. Another becomes a parent. Someone starts a new career. Someone else is caring for aging parents. Little by little, everyone's calendar begins moving in a different direction. Not because anyone stopped caring, but because life stopped moving together. Researchers studying adult friendships have discovered something surprising. Friendship doesn't usually disappear because of conflict. More often, it disappears because of distance. Not only physical distance, but the distance created by routines, different schedules, different responsibilities, different priorities. And perhaps the most dangerous phrase in adult life is one we've all said before. We should get together sometime. It's a beautiful sentence, but it rarely comes with a date. Children don't say that. Children simply ask, "Wanna play?" Adults negotiate. They compare calendars. Cancel because work runs late. Reschedule because someone gets sick. Promise to meet next month. Then another month passes, and another, until eventually, the friendship begins surviving almost entirely inside memories. Modern technology was supposed to solve this problem. Video calls, group chats, social media, instant messaging. And in many ways, it has helped us stay informed about each other's lives. But being updated is not the same as being connected. Seeing someone's vacation photos isn't the same as sharing the vacation. Reading about a promotion isn't the same as celebrating together. Watching someone's life unfold through a screen can quietly create the illusion that the relationship is still growing, even when it isn't. Perhaps the biggest misconception about adulthood is believing that friendships should happen naturally. But psychologists have found something fascinating. Professor Jeffrey Hall, who studies friendship formation, found that close friendships usually require dozens, even hundreds, of hours of shared time. Not because conversation is magical, but because familiarity grows slowly. Trust grows slowly. Shared experiences grow slowly. Children accumulate those hours without even noticing. Adults rarely do, which means something remarkable happens. Making friends no longer depends on kindness, or intelligence, or charisma. It depends on something much less exciting. Time. Repeated time. Unplanned time. Ordinary time. The kind of time modern life quietly steals from us. And then, something else begins to change. Not in your schedule, not in your calendar, but inside your brain itself. Because after years of protecting your time, your energy, and your emotions, your brain starts protecting something even more valuable. Who it allows inside your circle. You may think you're becoming less social, but your brain believes it's becoming more efficient. And that small change explains why saying hello to a stranger somehow became harder than giving a presentation to hundreds of people. To understand why, we need to look inside the adult brain. Imagine meeting someone new. They're kind, funny, easy to talk to. The conversation goes well. You even think, we should do this again. But something strange happens. Days pass, then weeks. Neither of you reaches out. Not because you didn't enjoy the conversation. Because your brain quietly decided, it isn't necessary. That decision rarely happens consciously. It happens beneath awareness. Every single day, your brain is making thousands of invisible calculations. Where to spend energy, who deserves attention, what deserves your time. As children, those decisions were simple. You had fewer responsibilities, fewer commitments. Almost every afternoon was an opportunity to strengthen friendships. But adulthood changes the equation. Now your brain is managing careers, deadlines, relationships, bills, children, parents, health, sleep, financial stress, unexpected problems. And because mental energy is limited, the brain becomes selective, extremely selective. It starts asking a different question. Not, who could become my friend? But, who absolutely needs my attention today? Friendship quietly moves lower on the priority list. Not because it stopped being important, because it stopped feeling urgent. This is one of the brain's greatest strengths, and sometimes one of its greatest weaknesses. Psychologists often describe the brain as an energy-saving machine. Whenever possible, it prefers familiar routines over uncertain outcomes. Making a new friend is uncertain. Sending the first message feels uncertain. Inviting someone for coffee feels uncertain. Starting a conversation with a stranger feels uncertain. And uncertainty requires effort. The older we become, the more our brains value predictability. Not because we're becoming antisocial, because experience has taught the brain to avoid unnecessary risks. Years of rejection, disappointment, awkward moments, busy schedules, and unanswered messages teach the brain an invisible lesson. Stay where it's safe. That's why many adults unconsciously wait for the other person to make the first move. Not out of pride, out of protection. What's fascinating is that almost everyone is doing exactly the same thing. Two people may genuinely want a friendship, both waiting, both assuming the other isn't interested, both walking away, believing nothing was there. Psychologists call this the liking gap. Research has shown that after talking with someone new, people consistently underestimate how much the other person enjoyed the interaction. In other words, we often believe we made a worse impression than we actually did. Your brain is trying to protect you from rejection that may never have existed. And then, something even more interesting begins to happen. As we grow older, our social circles become smaller. At first, that sounds like a problem. But neuroscience suggests something surprising. It isn't always a loss. Sometimes, It's a strategy. Older adults often invest more deeply in fewer relationships. Instead of chasing hundreds of connections, the brain begins searching for emotional quality, not quantity. One honest conversation can become more valuable than 100 casual interactions. The famous Harvard study of adult development, one of the longest-running studies on human well-being, reached a conclusion that surprised many researchers. The strongest predictor of a fulfilling life wasn't wealth, or fame, or professional success. It was the quality of close relationships. Not how many people knew your name, but how many people truly knew you, which means something remarkable. The goal was never to have the biggest social circle. The goal was always belonging. And perhaps that changes everything. Because if your brain still longs for belonging, then maybe making friends isn't about becoming someone new. Maybe it's about giving your brain the opportunity to trust again. Your brain never forgot how to build friendships. It simply stopped encountering the conditions that made them happen naturally. But here's the good news. The brain can still learn. Even now, even after years. And that's where our story truly begins. Maybe you've been asking yourself the wrong question. Maybe the question was never, why can't I make friends anymore? Maybe the real question is, why did it used to happen so effortlessly? The answer isn't that you became less interesting, or less kind, or less worthy of friendship. The world around you changed, and your brain simply adapted. Think about it. As children, we didn't have to search for friendship. Life placed us inside environments where friendship naturally grew. The same classroom, the same neighborhood, the same soccer field, the same lunch table. Every single day, our brains received the one thing they needed most: repeated connection. Not extraordinary moments, ordinary ones. Walking home together, waiting for class to begin, laughing over something that wasn't even funny, sharing silence without feeling uncomfortable. Those tiny moments were never tiny. They were the building blocks of trust. Today, most adults believe friendship requires some life-changing event. Meeting the perfect person, joining the perfect community, finding someone with identical interests. But that's rarely how friendship begins. More often, it begins with something almost invisible. A familiar face, a second conversation, then a third, then another. Before either person realizes it, trust has quietly started growing. This is where neuroscience offers something remarkably hopeful. Your brain remains plastic throughout your life. That means it never completely loses its ability to build new relationships. Neural pathways continue changing. Memories continue forming. Trust continues growing. Connection remains possible, even decades later. The challenge isn't age. The challenge is creating the conditions your brain recognizes. Repeated encounters, shared experiences, consistency, not perfection. Research on human relationships consistently points toward one simple truth. Friendship isn't usually created by dramatic moments. It's created by ordinary moments, repeated often enough. The barista who remembers your name, the neighbor you greet every morning, the person who always chooses the treadmill next to yours, the coworker you keep talking to after meetings end. These moments feel insignificant until one day they aren't. One conversation becomes 10. 10 become familiarity. Familiarity becomes trust. And trust becomes friendship. Perhaps that's why some of the strongest friendships begin where nobody was looking for them. Not at a networking event. Not through an algorithm. Not because two people desperately needed more friends, but because life quietly gave them another ordinary Tuesday. And then another. And another. Until strangers slowly stop feeling like strangers. There is something comforting about realizing this. Because it means friendship was never a talent that belonged only to children. It was always a process. A process your brain still understands. Maybe better than you think. Somewhere, right now, someone else is leaving work feeling exactly the way you sometimes do. Someone else is sitting alone in a coffee shop, walking through a park, waiting at an airport, standing in line at a grocery store, wondering, when did making friends become so difficult? They're not looking for hundreds of people. They're not searching for popularity. They're hoping for something much simpler. One genuine connection. One person who remembers their stories. One conversation that doesn't end when the coffee is finished. And perhaps, without realizing it, they're waiting for exactly the same thing you are. Maybe your next close friend isn't someone extraordinary. Maybe it's simply someone you've already seen several times, someone whose face has quietly become familiar, someone whose name you almost remember, someone whose story you haven't asked about yet, because sometimes the most important relationships in our lives don't begin with unforgettable moments. They begin with ordinary ones, repeated often enough. So if you've ever wondered whether it's too late, whether adulthood closed that chapter forever, the answer is no. Your brain never forgot how to make friends. It simply needs the kind of environment where friendship has always grown. Time, presence, repetition, and one small act of courage. A hello, a question, a smile, a second conversation. Maybe that's all friendship has ever been. Not something we find, something we slowly build. One ordinary moment at a time. The next meaningful friendship of your life may already be closer than you think. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because now you understand the invisible rules your brain has been following all along. And perhaps the next time life gives you the chance to start a conversation, you won't see a stranger. You'll see the beginning of a story that hasn't been written yet.